Welcome, everybody. If you're still joining, that's fine. Welcome to Tech for Eva's Expert Talks. Today, we're going to be sharing some insights, which we'll talk about in a minute. But first, we're going to just get to know each other a little bit better, just have an idea of where people are calling from. And my colleague, Barbara, is going to share screen and show us how to access Mentimeter. Those of you who have participated in these events today are quite familiar with it. You just write Mentimeter in your browser, maybe on your phone, and right away a window will appear and you can enter the code that you see on the screen, 21794784. If you have any questions, you can pose those.
Can you say the code again, Martha, please?
Yes, it's on the screen top. It's 21794784. Okay, the Swiss are not the fastest. We had Boston answer first. London, Sion, Ticino, Geneva. Okay, so good number of locations. And then we're still answering in Minneapolis.
Martha, I'm sorry, but I don't see the code on the screen. Please say it again.
2179. 2179 4784. Okay, if you don't answer. Okay, so that's for locations. So a lot of locations in 2 continents with Lausanne in the center. And Kreuzlingen as well, so Swiss German part. You want to go ahead, Barbara?
Yep.
So this is the second of 3 questions. What is one of the greatest passions in life? Food, urban art, travel, innovation, sailing, music, sport, and food. Joy and happiness. Okay, that's a very good one. Okay. And Barbara, the last question. Like to know who you're representing today? Startups, corporate, ecosystem stakeholders, one academia. Okay, so you could still answer as I just start to talk what we're going to be going through today. So the purpose of these sessions is really to share insights on today's session, how we can arrive at a solid understanding of our target customers, and as well as to look at ways in which this understanding can be used to communicate on a meaningful level with our customers, so as to really engage them and have them move faster from awareness to consideration and then to adoption of our products. The idea of this focus group of using expert talks is really to support skill building and to stimulate critical thinking among us, and at the same time building community. So really the major purpose of these talks is to rethink critically about our projects and to see if there's something we can adapt and fine tune. Just like when you live in a corporate setting, you get constant continuing education. This is similarly an opportunity to refresh and rethink. So our first speaker today is Tim. Tim is calling in from London. Thanks so much for being here. He's head of EU research for the London-based Planning Shop International, which I've had the pleasure to know for many years. They're an insight-led global brand consultancy and healthcare market research firm. servicing the world's leading biopharmaceutical companies. Tim's career spans the advertising and market research world, and as such, he has a depth of knowledge covering branding, advertising, digital PR, shopper marketing, and behavioral research. So today he's going to be talking about how we can use primary market research to develop a clear advantage for our products and brands. And it's going to be a little bit focused on selling to doctors, but everything that he says is very valid for selling DTC. And Tim, I hand over to you.
Thank you very much. Can you all see my screen, first of all?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So what I'm going to be talking to you today about is heuristics, basically, or behavioral science, and what guides choices that physicians, but also, as you said, consumers make. And what's interesting about the pharma world, which is the world that we kind of mostly operate in, is that there's a dominance of what we call the USP model. So the persuasion model, that if you give a doctor the science, the facts, then they will automatically, if those facts make sense and the science supports that choice, adopt that drug or the behavior that you want them to. So that is the kind of starting premise for a lot of pharma companies. I think, in the consumer world, kind of maybe less so, because you've seen the emergence of the emotional selling proposition, the ESP model, and more recently, the purpose model. But it actually, for the most part, isn't right. This isn't how people make choices, because we have too many decisions to make. So there was a Cornell University study that looked at the number of choices we have to make, and we have something like 35,000 choices to make per day. You just wouldn't believe it, would you? And 227 of those are about food. So we have so many decisions to make that it's impossible to make them all rationally, to think rationally about everything. You just don't have the time, and it takes a lot more energy from your body to think rationally. So I don't know whether many of you are familiar with Daniel Kahneman's work, but he is a neuroscientist who kind of posited that actually there are two systems in the brain, system 1 and system 2. So the system 2 is the rational brain that thinks, in a very effortful, controlled way about pros and cons of the choices that you might make. And system 1 is a much more subconscious, much more fast-thinking approach that makes choices based on, essentially past experience or learned experience. And so actually he found that he was looking at the proportion of decisions that are made in system 1 or system 2, and discovered that actually 80% of our choices, in the average day, are made in system 1. So the majority of our decisions are not, conscious, not rational. They're system 1 decisions. So I wanted to try and illustrate this, and you may have seen this before, but I wanted you to just think for a second about which orange circle is the largest of these two. Okay, and I won't give you that much time, but actually, a lot of you may have thought that the one on the right was the largest, but actually they're both the same size. It's just an illustration of automatic thinking. Here's another. I wondered if you have a scrap of paper, if you could just take a moment to just write your own signature down on that scrap of paper. And now you've done that, I wonder whether you could write down Marilyn Monroe's signature, which you can see on the screen here. So hopefully, if you've tried to do that and tried to follow her signature, again, that's an illustration that while you can write your signature pretty much automatically, if you have to think about writing someone else's, you have to kind of switch on that rational part of your brain, your system 2 brain, to copy her signature. So what about doctors then? Well, people assume that, well, physicians are, meant to be very, very rational people. So does this, system 1, system 2 still apply to physicians and the decisions that they make? And there have been a number of studies that have been done on this, but I think one of them, and the one that I kind of like the most, is about was on students. And actually, it was very clear that medical students were still using System 1 to make the majority of the decisions that they had to make, even though you'd kind of think that, if they're medical students, they're in the process of learning. So they'd be much more likely to use their rational mind at that point. But in fact, actually, no, they're using their System 1 mind to make a lot of the choices that they're making. And, you can imagine that if medical students are doing that when someone is 5 years into their career, 10 years into their career, 15 years into their career, their decisions are going to become much more automatic. So yes, it affects doctors as well. So then, given that, understanding what's driving those System 1 choices actually could give you an advantage over your competitors. If you're able to actually work out what is helping the brain to make those automatic decisions, how the brain is doing that, then you'd be better placed to, kind of skew the decisions that the brain is making in your favor. So then, how does System 1 work? Well, actually, there's a lot of work that's been done by neuroscientists in this field, but I think my favorite neuroscientist in this field is Lisa Feldman Barrett. You can find a lot of her work on TED Talks, but she talks about prediction. And actually what the brain is doing, because the brain is obviously, kind of sealed in a bone box in your skull, it's getting signals that are coming into it, and it's making decisions, kind of based on those signals. So what it does is actually kind of look at the signals that are coming in, and then make a decision based on what it's done in what it's experienced in the past and what's happened as a result of the choice it made in the past. So it's making a decision based on predicting the outcome of the choice that you're going to make. And it's doing that based on your past experience, but also anything that it's assimilated from marketing material or what other people have said about a particular brand or product or situation. So it's doing it through prediction. And what's really interesting about these predictions is they're so powerful that they can actually alter the experience that you have. So there was a great study that was reported in the British Medical Journal, where there were two cells of people who were suffering from pain, who were given identical painkillers in the identical dose. But one cell was given it branded and one cell was given it unbranded. And the really interesting thing when they got people to talk about the amount of pain relief that they experienced was that the ones in the branded cell they felt they were experiencing much greater pain relief than the ones in the unbranded cell. So what's happening there? It's the same drug. It's the same drug in the same dose. So what's happening? Well, what's happening is that the brain is, making a different prediction based on the branded element. And that prediction is influencing the way that that person is experiencing the result of that choice. So, what drives or what shortcuts does the brain use to make these predictions? There was some work that was done by the COI, which is basically the British government's communications office. And they're obviously responsible for, altering mass behavior or trying to change mass behavior. So they came up with the mind space model. And it's one actually that we've been adapting and looking at for pharma. But this model has essentially 9 buckets of heuristics. For example, they would say that, if a KOL, for example, was talking about a drug being very positive, then that would potentially influence other doctors to then think, well, in that situation that KOL talks about, I'm going to use that drug because, someone who is very, kind of raised up in the medical field is recommending it. We've seen that incentives can affect doctors' decisions. So, particularly in the US, where kind of administering a drug in a particular way actually might come with a different level of payment to the doctor, you actually see that influences their choices. People are influenced by what kind of their peers are doing. They can be influenced by, in terms of defaults, what they've done in the past. So if that's worked in the past, then I'm going to do that again. They can be influenced by how novel something seems. So if they're the kind of person that's interested in novelty, then they can be driven to try something new. You can be influenced by priming, and I think the best example I can give of this is in the not the medical field, but say for example you went into a restaurant and you rather than just picking up a plate of the food that you wanted, you picked up a tray. If you pick up a tray, you're much more likely to get more food. So you're more likely to get a dessert, you're more likely to get a drink with your meal, you're more likely to get a sweet snack or whatever to have afterwards. And that is a priming effect. Then emotion can affect choices. Then commitments. So, if you've publicly stood up and, supported something in the past, then you're more likely to support that in your behavior and what you do. And obviously with doctors, ego makes a massive difference. So, we act in ways that make us feel better about ourselves, and we see that a lot with physicians. So then, how do we uncover the heuristics that are behind the doctor's master? Well, there's a huge gap, first of all, between intended behavior and actual behavior. So if you ask people, to predict what they're going to do, it's quite difficult for them to do so because actually they're doing it out of context. And research often makes the wrong assumptions, including that people are kind of fully aware of and can articulate their own motivations, or that they can access and express the drivers of their system one decisions through direct questioning. So you have to try and find a different way of getting to it. You can't do it through direct questioning. So it requires a different approach. And I'm going to talk about just a couple of approaches that we have. This is not a full suite because I've only got a limited amount of time. But I'll talk about two approaches that we have. And then I'll talk about a process for actually, well, then what do you do? So how do you then alter behavior? Kind of what do you do to actually change the behavior to the behavior that you want? So the first thing I wanted to talk about is e-clinic. And this is where an approach where we try and mimic the doctor's real life decision making. So we put the doctor into an e-clinic. So we obviously can't interview the doctor in their own clinic with patients, but we do a virtual clinic with them where we give them a number of patients and the same kind of period of time that they would normally see their patients, which is quite short, particularly in places like the US. So we give them up to 8 patients, we give them the patient characteristics, and then they actually make their choices. So their prescription choices, or their the medical decision that they're making. And then we obviously interrogate those afterwards. That's e-clinic. The other is case story. And what's interesting is that actually our brains, our system 2 brains, often kind of post-rationalize the choices that we've made. So you often see this in research. People are kind of post-rationalizing their decisions. But actually, if you kind of do it through direct questioning, you can't kind of really get at what were the original drivers. But if you allow people to tell you the story of, a particular person that they were treating in their own words with, just very light prompting, without kind of trying to engage their rational brain, then actually you can often get at, some of the core drivers behind why they were making the choices that they were making. This is essentially using narrative psychology. The way that humans process the world is telling stories. So this is getting doctors to tell the stories of particular patients that they had, and then actually getting to the drivers through that. There's also, if you're thinking about, well, how do we use behavioral science to change behavior in our favor? You have to think, more about a process rather than just, a single research study. So we have something we call the 3I process. So the first step is that you interrogate. So potentially using some of the tools that I just talked about, you understand what's driving current behaviors and the current behaviors that you wish to change. Then you do step 2, which is to actually come up with potential interventions. So things that you could do to change the behavior in your favor. So people have talked, Richard Thaler in his book talks about nudge. So behavioral scientists talk about nudges, but more recently I was at Nudge Doc, and they were talking about shoves. So sometimes nudges aren't strong enough. You have to shove the person as well. So if you come up with a number of potential interventions, then you obviously need to kind of test them in the real world. So you need to beta test those potential interventions to see which works the best. And I wanted to give you an illustration of, before I do that, I just wanted to say, when you're coming up with nudges, this is a really good model to help think about it. So essentially it's the fog model, and it says that there are 3 factors that are necessary for someone to change their behavior. So they have to be motivated to do it. They have to have the ability to do it, as in, there are no physical barriers from their point of view, but also no social barriers to them doing, changing to the behavior that you want them to. But the third thing is to come up with these prompts, these triggers, these nudges, these shoves, because often people need a bit of a push to get over the line and actually adopt a new behavior. So the example that I wanted to give you was the use of hand sanitizer in hospital. So in this particular hospital, just 15% of staff and visitors were sanitizing their hands before entering the surgical ward. There was a brainstorm, and essentially 3 potential nudges were developed. So the first was having a set of male eyes, above the hand sanitizer unit, with a poster by the side of it, saying, indicating that it was, an area where you needed to use hand hygiene. The second potential nudge was the same, but with female eyes. And the third nudge was something different. It was using the olfactory sense. So actually, just having a citrus smell that was being given off next to the hand sanitizer. So I wonder, just for a second, again, obviously difficult to shout out, but just think in your head for a second, which do you think might have worked the best? Which of those 3 nudges?
The smell.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. So I don't know whether you all got there, but yes, for the brave people who shouted out, yes, absolutely. Almost, so against the control, where only 15% were hand sanitizing, actually with the olfactory intervention, 47% were sanitizing. So it's interesting, and that's kind of quite a lateral solution. And I think it's really interesting in behavioral science that actually, when you're coming up with, potential interventions, it's a really good idea to try and, spread them as much as possible, to come up with really different ways of achieving the objective, and actually to come up with some crazy ones as well. Try and be left field, try and think laterally about ways to, change behavior. So I think the citrus smell was quite a lateral thought, and obviously worked the best in this instance. The final thing I wanted to do was just to show you a couple of nudges that I'm very fond of. So the first one was by VW. There's quite a few more if you go and have a look at the fun theory, but it's really interesting. So there's another one with a litter bin where the litter bin, they were trying to encourage people to throw their rubbish away rather than leave it in the park. The litter bin made a sound like the rubbish was falling down a really, really, really big hole with a big sound at the bottom. So again, that encouraged people to do more positive behavior, and it's a really nice way of doing it. The second one is about how to, kind of address cervical cancer in the Amazon. So this is an interesting one.
No roads, no cell signals, no way to regularly remind Amazonian women about the Pap test against cervical cancer. In a region that has 3 times more incidence of the disease.
Esse CID-53 é o que ela tem, é um câncer no colo de útero. Quando ela já foi procurar um médico, a doença já estava agravando. Se uma vez ao ano as mulheres realizarem o exame do preventivo, nós podemos reduzir drasticamente as taxas de mortalidade pela doença.
We took the inspiration from nature to create a solution that will remind them every year to take the exam. Hermes Pardini presents Flower of Life.
A Flor da Vida é um híbrido de catleia que nós criamos através de cruzamentos e que, como floresce uma vez por ano, será utilizada para alertar as mulheres que chegou a hora de fazer o exame ginecológico. Esta planta é única e foi registrada na Inglaterra, que é o cartório mundial para o registro de híbridos. Agora que criamos essa planta, nós podemos reproduzi-la aos milhares por clonagem.
We started to send the Flower of Life through social workers, health agents, and local events to the Amazonian woman.
Agora com essa flor, né, é melhor de lembrar, é um calendário, para falar a verdade, pra gente, né?
São 3.000 agentes de saúde distribuindo 5.000 flores, alcançando mais de 1 milhão de mulheres. Essa campanha é diferente porque ela não vai durar só um mês ou um dia, ela vai durar uma vida toda. Você cuidando da planta, você cuida de você.
A flor da vida é a própria pessoa, né, que desabrocha para a vida, para viver com saúde, com esperança.
In the forest that helps the world breathe, a flower that helps women to live. Flower of Life. Hermes Pardini and Pedas State Department of Health.
So yeah, they're just 2 of my favorite case histories, but I think that last one is really interesting, kind of almost bioengineering to create a reminder for women to go and get the Pap test. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tim. I'm going to hand it over to the audience to ask questions, but I just wanted to say it's really interesting how branded products that we love make us feel better and make the consumer experience a more rewarding one. So that's really an important thing to remember. And the fact that fun prompts, once we understand what really motivates our customer, and if we can use fun prompts, it really seems like, that has an impact. So it's really important to get to understand that consumer behavior. So thank you very much for that talk. And over to our participants for questions.
Can I just say, there's a colleague of mine, Claire Markia, who is also online. So I think she will, if there are kind of other questions, she might answer some of the questions as well, if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you, Claire.
I have a question. Thank you so much, Tim, for the presentation. It was amazing. We're a direct-to-consumer company, so we don't sell to doctors, we sell to women directly. We sell a very nice bracelet that helps with hot flashes. And menopause is somewhat of a taboo topic still. And women really don't want to talk about the fact that they're going through menopause. I'm wondering, and we're about to start kind of a new exploration on how to go to market. I'm wondering, like, where do we start? What would be the best way to get started in this process of thinking about a new way to communicate?
I mean, so we do a lot of work with people who are, patients who are suffering from, kind of really awful diseases, kind of such as cancer and, people towards end of life. So, it is possible to, go and talk to these people in a sensitive way and, to kind of get some understanding. But I think that would be, well, in terms of the process, I guess what I would do if I was you kind of starting out, I'd do maybe a 3 or 4 step process. I kind of look at what research is out there because, there's a lot of secondary research in the market. So that's usually where I would start if I'm looking at a new problem or situation. So go and look at, any studies that have been done that are in the public space. And there are lots of, obviously universities that do, this kind of thing. And anything else that you can find, I'd assemble that, I'd synthesize it and work out what learnings you could take from it. And then I'd kind of develop a set of questions, that you wanted to answer coming out of that. Then I'd probably go into, primary market research. And I think there are, like I say, I mean, we talk to people who are, kind of suffering from terrible things that they, often really don't want to talk about, but there are ways of getting people to open up and talk to them. So I'd find, a research company to work with to talk to, people who are, kind of going through menopause. And then I would, kind of think about how you're going to do the communication. So I'd kind of brainstorm and come up with potential solutions. And then I'd probably research those with, your audience.
Kind of market test them, you mean, Tim?
What's that, sorry?
You kind of you'd market test those hypotheses.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just build on that a little bit. I've done some work in menopause and vaginal dryness and all sorts of things. So I think in this space, I'd in part of your plan, I think a little bit about influences to those decisions, particularly in menopause. It's often a circle of friends and family that you're connecting with, as well as other sort of external influences and information sources, be that the web, be that your physician. There's a kind of a network of information gathering that women go through. So you might want to think about that in sort of understanding the customer journey to choice. Right. So build out that roadmap and kind of understand, what are all the touch points that a woman has in making a decision, and what's that sort of ecosystem of choice like for that woman, because that gives you some avenues and opportunities that you can then leverage to your advantage, and making sure that you're speaking to women in the channels that make sense to them. So just as an example, some of the things we do is, we can do individual interviews, and we do sort of online interviews and all those sorts of things, but we also try and do things like dinner party groups, right? Where instead of a focus group, you make it a dinner party of women. And there's a moderator there, but it's a very light touch moderator. You just let women talk about turning 45, right? Turning 50. What's all going on for you now? And you can gently steer the conversation to menopause, but let it happen gradually. So you kind of get a sense of their lives, their world, before you kind of dive into menopause itself. It's a very important part of the process. And we talked a lot here about, all the things that affect behavior. And if you start too narrow a lens, you might miss something important. So just something to think about in however you choose to go about your research.
Thanks, Claire. Yeah, that's Talk Shop, which I think you were talking about, is, as you said, a kind of light touch moderated online community that we set up to, discuss issues like this. Yeah.
Yeah, what I was thinking about the fun factor, and believe it or not, what we hear from a lot of women and men is this whole concept that around menopause, the marriage is teetering because of these temperature problems. And so maybe also communicating to the male audience would be a great approach, and making fun of it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, there's as I say, I think there's a lot of influences in that space. A lot of tensions and influences.
I just wanted to add to that, because nothing takes away research the way that the planning shop is suggesting. But one way also to start thinking about the women and how they're thinking is there's a very helpful tool out there, which is called Answer the Public. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's a way to look at long tail searches that have been made in Google. And really, when we go to Google, that's the time when we take down any kind of hiding or some kind of mask that we have. We tell Google anything that we feel strongly about, or ask Google questions that we may not ask other people. And through Answer the Public, you can get a sense of what kind of questions women have around this topic of menopause. What are they looking? What are they seeking validation on? What do they need an explanation on? What are they trying to avoid? And this is not a way to cut out research later, but it's maybe a way to prepare yourself for that research. So it's not very expensive to sign up for Answer the Public. You can sort the searches by market. It could be a really helpful way to get started to how women out there are thinking about menopause.
Picking up on Sarah's point, actually, you can, like you say, there are tools like that, but also if you did social scraping, so there are companies that can help you do that, but you actually kind of look at how people are talking about it in social communities, and there may well be influencers who are talking about this kind of thing. So actually kind of looking at the conversations that people are having in the wild, as it were, is interesting as well.
So I have a question, Tim. Do you think in the future, somebody like Planning Shop might be combining tools such as Ask the Public or social scraping tools with your research? Might include both of those in your customer offering?
It's very interesting. We've already started to explore that, actually. And in fact, I guess it's more of a planning. It's interesting because we're called the Planning Shop, so we're trying to have more of a planning mentality. And that is often a start point, is looking at what you can find that's kind of out there already before doing the primary market research, because it kind of makes the primary market research that you do that much better if you do that. So yes, we are having those conversations, interestingly. Yeah.
Great. Any more questions? I just wanted to maybe ask one more question. You spoke about the mind space model, and there were 9 influencing factors. Can there be different situations when one factor becomes more important than the others? And did you be able to capture that through research?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. So we're kind of reworking the model actually for the pharma space, but we've looked at we kind of looked at all of the studies that we've done over the last kind of few years, and actually we've identified there are certain heuristic buckets that are at play in particular kind of situations, in particular therapy areas. So yes, there is definitely, they're not necessarily all at play in everything. There's definitely going to be one that's dominant in a particular situation. So I'm working on a vaccine project at the moment. I can't say the name of the vaccine, but it's one that has kind of defeated a disease and has therefore pretty much become the default choice. So it's interesting that even though competitors are coming in with advanced vaccines in this area, actually physicians aren't that automatically interested, because they go to their default choice that is the one that has pretty much eliminated the disease over the last 20 years.
Okay, makes sense. Okay, thank you, everybody. Thanks very much, Tim and Claire, and for answering all of those questions. So we move on to the second talk, which I think flows very well, from the first talk, because we heard that, we need to understand customers, and we need to develop prompts and do it in a fun way. And we've also heard that the way human processes information often involves storytelling. So this next talk is about storytelling, why it matters and how to do it. And with us today is Sarah Baldwin. She's the principal and co-founder of a company here in Lausanne, Shine Communications, a boutique agency which is focused on delivering excellence in strategic marketing communications and creative services across multiple platforms, because today that's what we have to do. Shine holds a lead agency status with Sunstar Europe, a company which services direct-to-consumer oral health brands, as well as preferred agency status for Nestle Nutrition Switzerland, among others. So over to you, Sarah, talking about storytelling and in ways which we can effectively engage our customers and convert them faster.
Okay, great. I'm going to share my screen, and you let me know if you see my screen.
When we see your screen. Not yet. Yes.
Yeah. You see it?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So indeed, it was great to hear Tim speak before, because there's a lot of overlap between what he said and what I'm going to talk about. As Martha said, humans perceive stories, or perceive life through stories. And also what I found very interesting was Tim's talk about System 1 and System 2, which also plays very much into the way that you tell stories. And at which point of let's say the customer journey, you choose to tell a story in one way or another. Again, remembering from what Tim said, that we have two systems, one being very lazy and one being, having to be more, and having to take more effort, System 2. So you need to take that into consideration to storytelling. But let me just go dive into it. The first thing I'd like to think about just for a second is to sort of contextualize all of this. And that is that when you're out there doing storytelling, you're probably going to be out a lot on digital. And every minute on the internet, there's an amazing amount of activity out there. There's more than 350,000 Instagram stories being uploaded, millions of WhatsApp messages. So it's a jungle out there. And what your role when you tell a story is to kind of make it through the jungle and stick your face in there and hope to be able to move some of the thicket and some of those leaves so that you can be heard. So you need to be relevant, you need to be poignant, you need to have something that is that is meaningful to people and that is catching people in order to leave an impression in your customers' hearts and minds. The other thing to remember is that out there in terms of storytelling, today we're in an era where everyone is doing storytelling. There's lots of generated content out there on the internet. And even though most of you will be saying, this doesn't concern me, the people that I serve are very serious, it does. Because people are multitasking, they're moving between screens, and this is the kind of stuff that you're competing for attention for, this cute baby and this cute cat. So storytelling really matters. When you tell stories, the important thing to remember is that stories have to arouse emotions. They're not descriptive. So remember, Tim just told us about System 1 and System 2. So System 1, which is lazy, really reacts very well to stories that are emotional, that are intuitive, that tell you something really positive in a second, and you grab that. While stories that are descriptive are going to be stories that are going to appeal to System 2 that make an effort. Now, you may at times tell System 2 stories when the customer is very engaged, but most of the time you want to arouse emotions. And this is why I put these two pictures up here. If you're out there and all of a sudden you're hit by some kind of communication, and one is showing you a tent with lots of information, technical information about the tent, are you going to be aroused by that, or are you going to be inspired by the experience that that tent is going to convey you? And that's just very powerful. You don't have to think about it, and everyone can take away from it what they want. So arousing emotions is really important. Good stories are also very authentic, and when they're authentic, they can create a really deep sense of connection, and they can build trust. And to do that, you need to know your consumer really, really well. And if you can show your consumer how well you know them, they will feel that you have a right to serve them. Because if you understand their problems and their life, the way that in a way that is so authentic and so real, that means your products must be meant for them. So I'm just going to show you a really nice commercial that was done by a sneakers brand for Mother's Day, and I think it's a wonderful way of illustrating this.
Hear that? That's the sound of you putting one foot in front of the other. It's not always pretty. It's not always easy. It's not always to somewhere. You're not always okay. In fact, you're mostly not okay. And even though you often feel alone, you're almost never alone. This is the marathon that never ends.
Look at that, that's so cool.
This is motherhood.
All right, so I think this is a very nice example of a product that's just totally fit into a consumer's life and takes the space that it should, and inspires trust. Good stories are also about creating experiences. And remember, Tim showed you an experience of someone choosing a stairs that made piano noises versus taking the elevator. And so when you have an experience, when you let consumers participate in your story, the story takes on a much richer meaning and it becomes deeply personal. So here I'm just showing you the living room cup that Nike did during the COVID time. And they told people to play inside and to play for the world instead of going out and doing it like they usually did. And they challenged people to bring out the best of themselves in their living rooms. And they had an amazing amount of success because this was an experience that everyone could participate in. So stories with experience are powerful. Good stories are also based on shared beliefs. They have purpose. Tim also touched on this. There's a big trend in the market towards purpose-driven communication. So the point about purpose is that when you can frame your story in this context of a shared belief that you may have with a consumer, all of a sudden you kind of change the way that you perceive your product because you are on the same team. And so if you're on the same team and you're fighting for the same things, then you're just much more likely to stay in touch and in times of hardships, or even to pardon a mistake. So stories that are built on purpose are very strong stories, and they build a strong sense of community between the brand and between the consumer. So you might be asking yourself, what is purpose? So purpose really is why a company exists beyond the reason that it has in making products. So it's essentially what good the company can bring to the world. And it can be an individual, it can be communities, it can be an environmental story. But purpose is about a greater meaning. And so those beliefs support that greater meaning. And you may be saying yourself, well, I don't have purpose. I'm just in a startup. I am, that's something for big corporates. But if you dig a little bit deeper, everyone has purpose. Everyone has a reason or a way that they can touch the people around them in a meaningful way that is beyond their products. And it's those beliefs that can connect you to those audiences. And that can tell some very, very powerful stories. And what you have here, I'm just showing you, is the example of Patagonia, who is a very progressive maker of sports equipment or sports apparel. And their future is intertwined with the good of the earth. And so is their customers. Their customers love adventures. They love the outdoors. And so they like to say that they're in the business of saving the home planet. And that's a very strong and powerful message for the audiences that they serve. So you may be saying to yourself, well, purpose is okay, it might be appealing to a younger audience or to millennials, but in fact, purpose is something that is very appealing to a wider public. Recently, Accenture and the Incognito Intelligence Unit did a survey, and they found that more than 60% of the respondents wanted companies to stand a stand about an issue that they were passionate about. And like I said, those issues don't need to be only about the environment. They can be issues that touch, people, communities. Here we have the example of what Unilever is doing with purpose. They have three strong brands, or let's say quite a number of their brands are now purpose-driven, and those brands, in fact, outperform the sales of their top brands that have not purpose-driven. And here I have an example of three of them. One is Dove, and Dove is all about nurturing self-esteem, or Axe, which is about redefining masculinity, or their laundry brands, which are celebrating that dirt is good. So like I said, purpose creates a deeper meaning or a deeper relationship with your consumer, and it makes the brand more resilient. And it's about what you believe, how you believe you can influence the world around you and make it a better place. So when you think purpose, think good. That's what it is. So how to develop a good story. I'm going to go through now. I'm going to take you through some of the steps on how you can develop a good story. And some of it maybe is going to seem sometimes a little bit, let's say, technical, but my point or my objective was to leave you with kind of a framework to lean on, so that if you have to ask yourself, I don't remember your name, but the person that was developing a bracelet for menopausal women, you have something to kind of think about as you're trying to think about how you're going to approach your communication. So the first thing that you want to do when you do storytelling is that you need to build a solid foundation. Without that foundation, you can't do storytelling. And storytelling is only an outcome of something that you've built before, which lets you confident about the messages that you want to give, your understanding of your consumer, and the kind of journey that you want to have with that consumer. So the first and most important thing when you get started with storytelling is that you have to know what you want to achieve. As an agency, I have lots of people that come to me and say to me, I want to build a website. And then I ask them, well, why do you want to build a website? You need to have a reason why. You need to give yourself some objectives and some goals. You can't just build a website. So there are many ways of defining your let's say your objectives, but I just put some here. You may have an objective of wanting to raise awareness about something. You may want to change the way people behave when it comes to something, or maybe you want to change the way that they think about something, or you maybe want to be recognized as a pioneer in something. But that needs to be clear in your head, because that defines the kind of storytelling that you're going to do and the kind of tools that you're going to employ. The second thing that you want to do is that you want to think about your audiences as people. You don't want to think of them as a PowerPoint chart. oh, you know, I have this type of audience. The moment that you start thinking of them as people, it changes the game. And so today we often speak about this exercise as building the profile of a persona. In classical consumer goods, this used to be 15 years ago a brand champion, but essentially you're painting a profile of that person as she is or he is in terms as a real person. And by doing that, you can think in much more intuitively about that person. You can think 360 about them. You can think also with your gut, what goes through their mind, what kind of reactions they may have to your product. So it's a way to free your thinking and to get you beyond the white PowerPoint slide in front of you where you're stuck within a framework. So there are many ways you can define a persona. Here I just put down some questions, and they can be tuned according to the market that you're operating in. But usually you want to give them a name, you want to give them an age, you want to sort of think about what kind of a profession they have, what their goals and aspirations are, and very importantly, what their pain points are with respect to what you do. And what could they be passionate about, who could they trust, and what kind of media do they consume. And that already gives you, if you do that exercise, that gives you some really good feeling about what issues your consumer has, what things can you help them do, what kind of influencers could you perhaps turn to, and where in the media could you find them and talk to them about your product. The second thing you want to do is to think about your value proposition in terms of that audience, like how are they going to react with respect to what I have to offer. And so, sort of what can I help them do that is relevant to them, and how does my solution work for them. And this sounds really kind of silly, but there are lots of companies that have come to us that had a really hard time to describe how their solution worked, because they were stuck about talking about it in their own terms, how it worked for them and technically, but not how it worked for their audience, and what is important for them, what barriers may they have. And this is important because you may have to reassure them about this. What kind of misconceptions, what kinds of fears, what kind of attitudes or limitations may they have to your product. And finally, you have to think about, how is it better what I'm offering that they were already doing before? That's an important point. Finally, you want to kind of take all of this and put it into an outline. And you want to keep it simple. Don't try to include everything. Only include the most important things. And in this outline, you kind of want to have at the core something that holds it all together, which spells out your promise, and it's based on your value proposition, and it resolves the pain point or the tension that they have. And you may want to have that promise that you spell out there, something that you work with your agency, but ideally it's something short, it's something that captures the essence of what you do, it's something that actually sparks curiosity when people see it out of context, it's something that also captures the essence of what you do without having to describe it fully. You don't have to, that promise doesn't have to describe it, has to make sense. It has to spark curiosity and make sense after someone has actually gotten to know you, and it's a way of sort of holding a footprint in your head, on their head, of what you do. And then you also want to kind of, based on the work that you just did, you want to summarize what's in it for them, so their benefits, and why they should believe you. You have to give them good reasons to believe you. And you may want to do this for your target audience, for your consumer or your customer, but maybe also for the influencers, because you're going to be talking to them as well, and you're going to have to also employ some of the same tactics. So I'm going to maybe just very quickly show you how that would pan out if in an example. And this is a company that is local here that teaches digital education to kids, and it's called TechSpark. It's already a great name because you're about to, you're sparking curiosity about technology. And I'm going to just take you through the same exercise, like if I was TechSpark, just so that it makes sense. So TechSpark Basically, the way that they've sort of defined their storytelling, their communication is, they've decided that they, first of all, need to raise awareness about the importance of digital literacy as one of the most important new capabilities to develop to succeed in the future. They believe that all kids should have digital literacy to succeed in the future. And then they want to change the way parents and kids think about digital learning and make it attractive to everyone, to girls, boys, non-techies, and techies. So it's, on the one hand, raising the awareness of the importance, and on the other, they want to change the way people think, because there's lots of misunderstanding about digital, putting it in a corner as something very complicated that only pertains to few, and that's not the point. So TechSpark serves people. A typical customer for TechSpark would be a parent. It could be a male or a female. Here we've just taken Laura as an example. Laura's 48. She's a mother of one girl and a boy. She's head of global risk management at P&G, and she's a rising star in her field, and she aspires to lead the discussion of the future of work. She aims to give her children the very best education and has invested in private schooling. So you already know what kind of a person you're going to be looking at. You're defining that person. You're looking for someone that is educated, that cares about her children's schooling, and you're going to sort of define that her weak point, or her, or let's say where she struggles, is finding a balance between work and family life. And she's worried that today's classical education may not fit the fast-changing world her kids are growing up in. She's reading about that all the time. And she's also struggling with screen time with her kids. It's sort of a problem within the family. And digital is a bit of a black box for her. But she's passionate about adventure, about continuous learning, and so she's open to new ideas, and she trusts data and experts. She reads The Economist, and she values the advice of her peers and her children's in her children's school. So here we go. We have a little bit about a profile of Laura. We understand what drives her. We understand where she feels vulnerable. We understand where we could potentially help her and how we could potentially influence her. And we spelled that out. And we did that because we really imagined Laura. And then when we go on to speak about Laura and what TechSpark can do with her, we can say that we can see that TechSpark can provide Laura's kids the opportunity to experiment with digital, a technology that is shaping the future and is not part of their school curriculum. Laura can choose from online courses and offline camps, and a list of hands-on of STEM courses. The instructors and university students from top tech universities, and the camps combine technology and sports. She can seamlessly sign up online. So since you know that Laura is very busy, the fact that she can all of this, she has choice and she can do it very fast and very seamlessly, is very important. What is this important to her? Because she's excited she can offer her children an opportunity to discover skills that will help them succeed. And she looks forward to learning more about digital herself, because she feels like this is a bit of a black box. So Laura needs to convince, what barriers might she have? She needs to convince her children the camps will be fun. And she's hesitant because her children are not science types. Will they fit in? And she's worried about her daughter, because her daughter might be to stand out as a sore thumb. So, and what are these camps doing better? Unlike other camps, they are focused on entertainment, that are focused only on entertainment. TechSpark camps offer an experience. They open the door to a new world, and parents are invited inside the camp, and kids can continue to explore after their camp, online and offline, with instructor, tutors, and mentors. Well, the point is not to understand what TechSpark has to offer, but the point is just to see that you can spell out, with respect to what you know about that person, you can try to spell out your offer in terms of that person. And you've probably already done some of this job within the context of your product development, but it's a nice way, I find, to crystallize it. And then you can go on, like we said, to put it into this single framework. And for TechSpark, you know, their sort of their promise is get digital. You can get digital, meaning like you can understand digital, you can become digital. ride the digital wave, think, create, and develop curiosity for what's powering the future. I'm not going to go into more detail on this because I think you've got it, but the reason why I like to bring this out is that very often people engage in storytelling without having a clear notion of what they want to say, and they get lost in the process. So if you have a map when you do your storytelling and you know exactly what you want to say, and that is not to be said that you can't change this map as you go along, as you discover new things, that is extremely comforting and helpful for you and also the agency that you're going to brief that's going to work for you. You're going to have a base, a bottom line that you can compare yourself and see where your storytelling is going compared to where you want it to go. I want to talk just a second about how to work with your agency. The first and the most important thing is that your brief is fundamental. The number of times that we have had customers come and just tell us, oh, here's a brief, here's a couple of slides that I've just slapped together, and let's have a 5-minute conversation, and then let's get started and show me something right away so that we can judge whether that's the direction we want to take. No. The brief is really, really important because it makes you think, and it then gives also direction, guardrails, and inspiration for the agency. If you spend time on your brief, you will have a much better outcome with your agency. And so the brief, it essentially, in a nutshell, is supposed to provide context. You have to describe what you do. You have to set clear objectives. You have to paint a picture of your target audience. Tell the agency about the foundations of your story. You may want to change the foundations of your story with the agency as you move along, but you need to do that work yourself at first. And then you also want to tell your agency what you like and you don't like, because along the way, as you worked on your products, you've already probably, seen things from competitors or things that have inspired you and things that you really didn't like. And that's not to be said that the agency is going to follow exactly what you say, because they may challenge you. But if you already share that, that's an important starting point. And then, of course, communicate timing and budget constraints. And that's another thing that I'd like to say that is important. A lot of time people hesitate to give budgets because they feel like, the agency should, I'm not going to give them a budget. They might give me a price that is much lower than what I'm giving them in terms of budgets. An agency, given a brief, can do innumerable things in function of the budget. The budget tells the agency how many resources they can invest in the storytelling and in the campaign. What you want to tell the agency is that this is a competitive pitch. That you should do. Always ask for a competitive pitch so they know that they are being pitched against another agency, and they'll have to do the best that they can in terms of creative and also in terms of costs. But, if you can, do give a sense of budget to the agency. And then finally, also always give, if you have some branding and trademark guidelines, always include that in your brief. That's very important. Okay. Let me just move on. I'm stuck. My computer is not responding. Okay, here we go. The first thing that you also want to define with your agency is we talked before about a journey and about touch points. So in communication, you really have 4 steps, right? And you have a first step, which is awareness, then where you catching the attention for your product. A second step, which is consideration, which is where the person is really evaluating your product, purchase, and then retention. And so maybe here it's even interesting to think about what Tim said before. Awareness, you want to be completely in system 1. You can't be in system 2 and asking people to make an effort during the awareness phase about your product. You can't sit there and tell them a list of great things that you've got, because first thing is, you need to have them hook on in a simple way. So awareness is that phase where you inspire, where you build curiosity, where you catch attention, where you contextualize, where you tease. You cannot list the features of your products during awareness. And you might be, meeting people. You got to think about where to catch those people. Is it, on social? Is it through Google? Is it through owned channels? There's a variety of things, and that needs to be thought out depending on how your audience is. When you go to consideration and the person is already trying to is aware of your offer and is considering whether this is right for them or not, that's where you want to build relevance and excitement about what you've got, and you want to promote your benefits and your reasons to believe. And typically a lot of this happens on websites through direct selling or through blogs or what have you. Here you're really selling more. Finally, when you get to purchase, you want to have a sense of urgency. You want to convert them. You want to make them feel like, got to do it now or never. This is the time to buy. And so you need to incite, you need to make it easy to buy, and you also should let them know when they've bought that they've made a great choice. Pat them on the shoulder. You've done a great choice. And this happens, of course, in many different places. Purchase can happen in a physical store, in a virtual store, in a meeting. It can happen in different spots. And finally, you have retention. Once someone has bought, you want to consolidate trust, and you want to continue building good feelings between you and your customers. Those are the two things you want to think about during retention. And there again, there's lots of valuable tools. So when you set out to build your story with your agency, you want to think about this journey, and you want to think about whether your brief is about one particular part of the journey, or whether you need to build the entire journey or a part of the journey. But that's very important, because your story needs to be outlined with respect to this journey. Okay, so if we take a look at just to give you an idea of what TechSpark did, they when in the awareness part, they reached out a lot to parents by addressing some of the issues that they have, some of their pain points. So talking about screen time. How do you resolve the issue of screen time, and sort of hooking them into that conversation that way. Or they also used posters to get people excited within schools being influencers. They use their website and video to then convince customers and parents and kids that this was the right place to be, that this is the place where they could have fun and they could learn. And then at purchase, they really gave them good reasons that they should really convert now and they should sign up now, because there was a limited promo offer that was in there for them. And to retain them, they continued to create experiences after that through weekends and workshops, and sometimes free events where people could stay connected with TechSpark and could continue learning in other ways, and with the objective, of course, of bringing them back and take on other courses other than the one that they had already taken. So, important thing to think about when you write your story is keep it simple and build tension and adapt it to each stage of the journey. When I say keep it simple and less is more, this is important because a lot of people want to say everything all the time. They come to you and they say, I want to build a video, and instead of thinking of where that video fits in their journey, they want the video to say everything and discuss the customer along the way. So you need to keep it simple, and you need to think about the journey, and every element of the story has to be anchored on a central message that is relevant, engaging, and memorable. And you want to build curiosity and tension, and then resolve. When I say tension, think of any classical movie that you've seen. The tension builds throughout the movie. You're like, oh, what's gonna happen? What's gonna happen? And then you resolve it. So that's good storytelling. And if you can, you weave in experiences. And again, to sort of drive what I began with, always think string of pearls. Your story is like a pearl necklace in your journey, and Every element is a pearl, but together they need to form a necklace, and it needs to fit together perfectly so that it can be something beautiful and something that you want to hook onto. Okay, I'm going to show you one more example that I think is kind of fun about an ad that is around one central message. Is really simple and it's sticky. It sticks to you, and it's going to be a bit in French and a bit in English, and it's about the city of Brussels needed to bring traffic down. They needed for people to be more mobile with alternative means of transportation. And they came up with this ad. I think it's a really fun ad in this campaign. And I'm going to show you this ad as well as some elements of the rest of the campaign.
La liberté, c'est un voyage vers le bonheur. Un pas de plus qui nous pousse à aller plus loin. Cette liberté, nous l'avons cherchée pendant des années.
We've spent years looking for an alternative mode of transport for short distances.
Et nous l'avons enfin trouvée. Nous sommes fiers de vous présenter les pieds. Une technologie unique, inspirée du passé, pensée pour le futur.
Бидэд автомашин, автобус, скутер гэх мэтээс илүү үр дүнтэй тээврийн хэлбэрийг хайж байсан.
Feet have 26 bones. The first metatarsal bone is the strongest.
Produit localement à base de matériaux 100% naturels, disponible 24 heures sur 24.
There are absolutely no limits. I can use them whenever I like.
Feet are so intuitive. Honestly, I feel like I've known the product since I was born.
2 modes de verrouillage, rechargeables partout.
Feet have been tested in different situations, even in the most extreme conditions.
Découvrez les pieds, disponibles dès maintenant, en bas de vos chevilles.
I hope that all of you could catch les pieds, the feet. And I think the story is really nice. It's really fun. It's very intuitive. It speaks to you. And the city of Brussels, had this video, but they also had a series of of ads that they had all around the city with reminding people about all the advantages of their feet. And also they wove in some experiences where at benches along the anywhere in the city, they had these recharging stations for your feet, or they had socks that people wore, and influencers wore those socks and posted stories on social platforms. So it was a very successful campaign, very simple and quite fun. All right. The last thing I want to do for you very quickly is I want to give you some tips for storytelling on social, and these are just quick tips here and there. And I think the name of the game on social is authenticity, because that's where social was born. It's out of authenticity, out of consumer generated content, and so that's what people are looking for on social. One thing to think about is that employee advocacy and the employee word really speaks on social, and it can help you build trust. So there's been research out there, but typically the word that posts shared by employees, shared content by employees, is shared 8 times more, gets more times more engagement than content that is shared by brands. So people look at employees as a trusted voice, as someone that you can really rely on. So if your employee wants to talk about your product and how their experience with your product is and why they think it's really great, or how great it's to work within your team, and the belief that you have and the things that you are promoting as a company, that is a very good and important source of trust building that you can engage in on social platforms. Another important thing on social platforms, or another thing that really speaks, is in terms of authenticity is the word of leaders, the word of CEOs, and strong leadership and outspokenness is something that's really rewarded. And I think that all of you can associate big brands with the CEOs, like Steve Jobs with Apple, but even with small brands, CEOs can have a big role to play on social platforms. And I'd like to show the example of Respire, which is a very small company started in France 2 years ago by a woman that had cancer. And she decided to make products that were that she felt were personal care products that she felt were more gentle and would protect you from that would be more gentle on your body. And so Justine is her name, and right now in France the story is as much about the products as it is about Justine's story. So the story of people, of CEOs, of leaders, and builds authenticity, and is something that really speaks to people. Another thing that I think you guys all know, that influencers are really important, but maybe one important trend that came out after the pandemic is that there's been a rise in micro and nano influencers. And so those may be interesting for smaller brands. You don't have to go to a really big influencer to have impact. Small influencers can be just as trustworthy and build just as much love. And then an important thing to keep into consideration is that video is something that people love on social. It's what drives a lot of engagement and views. People are more likely to share video content than they are static content. And video can also really convince people to buy products or to buy a service. It's very relevant. And another important thing out in social in terms of the kind of content that you might want to develop is how-to. Anything that related to how-to competes. So a tutorial competes really well with other content that youth may think is just unbeatable, like funny videos and memes. So there's something to exploit for all of you in terms of the kinds of content that you might want to put out to promote your products or services. And finally, the last thing is that social media is also emerging as a top channel for purchase, not just discovery. So some of you may want to think of that. And it's, the experience is really seamless, and it's also just extremely intuitive. And it's a channel that is really evolving in terms of in terms of e-commerce. And I think that's that. And I hope I have convinced you that investing in storytelling matters. And I hope I have also left you with something to get started if you have to do storytelling, on how to approach it. There's no one solution on how to do it. There are many ways to do it, but this is what I would suggest.
Thank you, Sarah. Tim, you came back. Did you want to make a comment?
Oh, no, I was just going, not specifically, no, I was just coming back for the questions, just in case there was anything to pick up on. I have a background in advertising, so that was the reason.
You can relate.
Yes, exactly, yeah. And a lot of what Sarah's saying rings very true to, kind of the way that I've tried to work. I because of the emergence of earned and shared, I've worked in PR before as well, which is the earned space. I think I was kind of talked about contagious storytelling. You almost have to come up with something, an idea that people want to spread about your brand. So obviously a truth, but something that really kind of grips people. And they connect with, and then they want to talk about and share with others. And I think that works in the earned space as well as the shared space, as it were. So earned being, kind of media companies picking up on it, shared being consumers picking up on it.
I have a question, because a lot of people that are with us today have young companies. Maybe I've already had some sales, but I'm really trying to expand my reach, and I'm reworking on my campaign. I've done the market research. I have an idea about my target consumers, and I'm working on personas. So how many personas should I be targeting in my campaign? How many different types of personas can I reach, or how many can I target at launch?
It depends on your budget.
Okay.
So the more personas you have, the more expensive it is. So if you have a limited budget, you should think about your super consumer and your super persona. And typically what happens is that, and maybe Tim can attest to that or not, is that your super consumer is going to be like 70 or 80% of your sales. And then the rest, or maybe that's exaggerated, but then there's going to be some more. But it's honing in onto what you think. Of course, that's risky because you're putting all your eggs in one basket, but there are returns to risk. So depending on the budget that you have, you're better off in limiting, but you should always think, I think both, consumer and influencer. That's very important. I don't know if you want to add to that, Tim.
I agree wholeheartedly with you. I worked on Reckitt Benckiser in the past, selling their cleaning products. What was really interesting to me was that I began to notice, because I was starting to do research in people's homes rather than getting them to, kind of come to a research facility. And because I was in their homes, I was seeing the other cleaning products that they were using, and it became rapidly relevant, obvious to me that there were super consumers of, the highest end cleaning products. That, if they had Finish, they also had Airwick, they also had Dettol, So no, I totally agree. And if you want to create a change as well, there was an interesting talk at Nudge Stock this year. That actually, in a way, it's almost better to start in the peripheries if you've got something that is revolutionary, because you need, kind of people who are, not close to the center, who are not, kind of wedded to the current way of doing things to actually adopt it. And, once you kind of build a critical mass of, say, 25% of those people, then it flips into the mainstream. So, yeah, I think focus definitely is important.
So it's better to own a specific group, a specific persona, and do that well and then move on, rather than trying to do too many things at the same time.
And focus almost on people who would then spread the story as well. So focus on people who would then become advocates to other people.
The consumer and the influencer, that's right.
Yeah, exactly.
Can I ask a question? It may be a little bit redundant, actually, with what you were just asking, Marta, but I just want to, taking myself back here, this has all been so fascinating, and I can't wait to have a budget to do this, right? Like, I can't wait to work with you, Tim, and I can't wait to work with Shine. Oh my gosh, when Phonomics has that budget, let's go. So, but just coming at this from my very simplistic perspective as a bit of a science geek gone consumer. So let's say, and maybe I'm speaking for some of the other really early startups like me. I have a prototype, so I'm near having a prototype, and I've done my consumer research. So I think I'm producing something that people in my space want. And actually, my space is very similar to Liz's from Emperor Labs, which is in the menopause aging area, and nutrition. For me, it's and nutrition and precision nutrition. So I have my prototype, and so my next step is to do like a pilot commercial launch, let's say. I have no budget. I have nice people helping me. So what would be the first thing I should do with this eye on to just discussed focus, a focus persona, a focus this or that? If you were me, what would be the first thing you would do?
That's a tough question to answer with no budget. The first thing you could do is to find influencers. This is what we just said before. Influencers that are willing to help you because they're passionate about the same things that you're passionate about. Mm-hmm. That would, to me, would be the first thing to do, and then to try to build a community through those passionate members of your community, and through whatever tools you've decided to do. But that would be my first gut reaction. But to say that you have no budget is not right either, because you're going to be investing your time doing that, and so there's a cost to that, because you're not going to be doing something else. So think carefully about that.
Yeah, no, there's probably a better way to say that. Yeah. But in terms of budgeting my time, you know, where the company would get the most benefit.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing you want to think about is, what are you trying to do? Because are you trying to get consumers excited, or are you trying to raise money? Because if you want to launch this, you need money. So maybe the first thing you need to do is to actually get funds, and then maybe you're going to be talking to someone else rather than consumers. So you got to think carefully about how you're going to follow this through, to think about what is your objective of your storytelling, like we said before, because you got to think about your action plan. So if you're going to go even to influencers and consumers, but you can't follow through, that can create some hype, and that can help you raise money and whatever, but it's got to be part of a whole ecosystem that allows you to move forward. So I think that's really important. Think about your ecosystem, and then think about where the low-picking fruit is, but think about where you want to go.
I totally agree. I think that's exactly what I'd do as well. I was thinking, I'd look at the influencers in there. If you want to launch, I'd look at the influencers in that space. But as Sarah says, you have to think about what your kind of rollout plan is.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so we're actually at 4:30 CET. If there's any more burning questions, I'm sure that the speakers would be willing to take it. Otherwise, I just want to actually leave it to you. Do we have any more burning questions? Okay. All right. So I just wanted to say, from the point of view of this focus group, thank you so much to both of our speakers. I think it gives us some tools to think about marketing. I think we all know that the most important requirement for a successful innovation is customers. And the most important thing is to be able to reach out to those customers. So I think this provides us with some tools to think going forward. And I wanted to let you know that our next session with Expert Talks will be on September 22nd, where we're going to be talking about market access, reimbursement, and how to price our innovation. And we're going to hear from Procter & Gamble Healthcare here in Geneva about how they integrate products that they acquire. So that'll be on the website. See you on September 22nd. And I guess if you need any more information, contact us separately. And have a great weekend, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.